Okay. Didn't I tell you a few weeks ago that China was the story going forward as far as the markets were concerned? Remember that? Yet the inquiries regarding my views on Greece continues to astound me. Don't get me wrong, it's heartening to hear that my listeners are beginning to understand that in order to develop an art to investing, one needs to acquire an above-average knowledge of global issues, and you're getting that. On the other hand, folks, you have to be careful to home in on the places in the world that matter most to your portfolio. And right now, as we learned last week, that place is China. And it's not hard to figure out. Just go around your house, and you're going to have more products there that were made in China, and you will be hard-pressed to find any that were originally produced out of Greece. It's that simple. It's not hard. Trust me when I tell you that. So I rest my case when it comes to the issues between Greece and China. So enough already about Greece. Anyway, what about China and the recent antics? That's right. There were plenty of them to go around last week. Specifically, the devaluing of their currency, known as the yuan. Now, I believe that it had a lot to do with the shifting of economic policy over there. As I've mentioned on this show many, many times, China would love to move to an economy that's more consumer-based, much like we have here in the United States. Up until the last few years, they have been relying on exports for growth, and quite successfully, I might add. However, they came to realize that when the world slows down or recesses, their trading partners don't buy their goods like they did during the times of expansion. Hence, a slowdown in their economy. So they figured the answer to that problem was to rely more on your own people to consume. And that has been the path they have followed over these past few years. Well, you have to understand, or they need to understand, that a shift in policy of that magnitude, from export-driven to consumer-dependent, it takes a considerable amount of time to reap the desired benefits, which, in fact, the chief amongst them, the benefits they're looking for, is to become independent economically. When you have a country as big as China and you want to move, you want to make that kind of transition, I liken that to trying to turn the Titanic around in a canal. It takes time. It can be done, but it's tough, and it takes a whole lot of patience. Now, we saw that this past week. They moved to devalue their currency. And what that meant was they want to make their exports cheaper. The items that their companies over there export to countries like the United States, Europe, Australia, South America, all those countries there, those items that they ship are a whole lot less cheaper when you devalue your currency, making the profits that they get, those exporters in China, expand. Well, what that showed, at least temporarily, was that they abandoned the strategy to predominantly be a consumer-based economy. They said, you know what, times are tough, where this consumer-driven thing is not getting it, we're slowing down, and we are going to go back to our old ways. And you and I do that a lot in other areas in our lives. We revert back to the old way because the new way wasn't working. Well, I think what China's doing is is okay. They're trying to find a balance between exports and consumers. Who can they trust more? Well, I think we need to do a lot of the same things they're doing. See, we already have here in the United States a consumer-driven economy. We are very much dependent, for about 2/3 of our economy is largely dependent upon you and I and what we spend. China is looking to get there. They're looking to try to find a balance. And we need to find more exports, more ways to increase our exports so we're not so dependent on the consumer. Well, they're going through that. That's what's happening. And that's okay. I like to see that. So 10 years from now, we're going to look back on August 20, the week of August 20th, and we're going to say, oh, I remember back in 2015, China was, trying to work that out. Well, that's what's happening right now, folks. And and they'll get it. They will get it. But there's going to be a little bit of pain in the process. And that's what you saw this past week. And so why all the chaos here in our markets and around the world? After all, that's why I know many of you are tuned into the program this morning, because Art, that's fine. But why did our markets go down the way they did this past week? Well, I'm going to explain to you. China happens to be the second largest economy in the world. And when you are the second largest economy in the world, it happens to be major customers. There's a lot of customers that buy their goods and services. We do. Europe does. South America does. They're slowing down. They're adjusting. The world itself is slowing down. And when you have all these companies that rely on China and all of a sudden they're not buying the way they used to, you get what we saw last week. And it has an effect on many of the stocks you have in your mutual funds or within the portfolios of your individual stocks. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. Volkswagen happens to be one of the stocks in the art of investing index. The company manufactures and sells many of its vehicles in China. Therefore, if China slows, it only makes sense that sales of Volkswagen will suffer to some degree anyway, probably to the degree of the slowdown of China. Has anything fundamentally changed at Volkswagen? Not really, at least not that I know of, and I do follow the company. They're still making cars the way they have been over the past few decades. Also, consider a company like U.S. Steel. Much of China's infrastructure, like bridges, airports, buildings, etc., requires steel. So if China's economy suffers, and you have to see that, again, the art of investing is to recognize that U.S. Steel, to some degree, is going to suffer, and the price of its stock will accordingly. So that is what's happening. The markets, simply put, are repricing stocks to reflect the slowdown in China. And what exacerbated the sell-off this past week was the fact that the markets were shocked to find out that China's economic problems may even be worse than China expected. That really spooked the market.